Hello, students. Your topic for today is rights and liabilities of a seller and a buyer. So, rights and liabilities of a seller. Following are the rights and liabilities of a seller. First, production of documents. So, on buyer's request for examination, seller is bound to produce to the buyer all the documents of the title which are related to the immovable property and which are in seller's possession or power. Second is disclose to the buyer material defect. So, there is the bound is to disclose to the buyer and material defect if the property or in the seller title thereto of which the seller is and the buyer is not aware and which is the buyer could not with ordinary care discover. Then the third is answer to questions. So seller is bound to answer to the best of his information all relevant provisions which buyer puts to him in respect of to immovable property or title to immovable property. The next is rent and profits. So the seller is entitled to the rents and profits of the property till the ownership thereof passes to the buyer. Then care of immovable property and documents. So between the date of contract of sale and delivery of immovable property, seller is bound to take as much care of the property and all documents of the title as an owner of ordinary prudence would take care of such property and documents. Delivery of possession of immovable property. So the seller is bound to give possession of immovable property to buyer or some other person according to direction of buyer. Then is to give possession. So the seller is bound to give on being so required the buyer or such person as he directs such possession of the property as its nature admits. Next is to pay all public charges. So the seller is bound to pay all public charges and rent accrued due in respect of the property up to the date of sale and the interest of on all encumbrances of such property due on such date, and except where the property is sold subject to encumbrances, to discharge all encumbrances on the property then existing. The next is to delivering documents. So the seller is bound where the whole or of the purchase money has been paid to the seller to deliver to the buyer all documents of title relating to the property which are in seller's possession or power. The next is subsistence of interest. So the seller is depend to contract with buyer that interest which seller professes to transfer to buyer subsist and that he has power to transfer such interest. And when sale is made by a person in a fiduciary character, he is deemed to contract with buyer that seller has done no act whereby immovable property is encumbered or whereby he is hindered from transferring it. The next is payment of purchase money. So when ownership of immovable property has been passed to buyer before payment of whole of the purchase money, seller is entitled to a charge upon that property which is in hands of buyer. Now, rights and liabilities of a buyer. So, following are the rights and liabilities of buyer. The first is the right to get benefit of improvement. So, the buyer is entitled where the ownership of the property has passed to him to the benefit of an improvement in or increased value of the property and to the rents and profits thereof. The second is to disclose any fact about property. So the buyer is bound to disclose to the seller any fact as to the nature or the extent of the seller's interest in the property of which the buyer is aware but of which he has reason to believe that the seller is not aware and which materially increases the value of such interest. Then is the payment or tendering of purchase money. So the buyer is bound to pay or tender purchase money to seller or some other person according to the directions of the seller at time and place of completing sale. The next is bearing of loss. So when ownership of an immovable property has been passed to buyer, he is bound to bear any loss which arises from destruction, injury, or decrease in value of the property when such destruction, injury, or decrease is not caused by the seller. The next is entitlement to improvement and increase in value of immovable property. So when ownership of immovable property has been passed to buyer, he is entitled to benefit of any improvement in the property or increase in value of the property. The next is entitlement of rents and profits. So when ownership of immovable property has been passed to buyer, he is entitled to rents and profits of the property. The next is entitlement of charge on immovable property. So the buyer is entitled to charge on immovable property to the extent of seller's interest in the property, to charge for amount of any purchase money which is properly paid by buyer in anticipation of deliver, and to charge for interest on such amount. Such charge is against seller and all persons who claim under seller. Here condition is that buyer should not have improperly declined to accept delivery of the property. That's all. Thank you.